Hi, I'm David Kais, and I run R for the rest of us. You may think of R as a tool for complex statistical analysis, but it's much more than that. From data visualization to efficient reporting to improving your workflow, R can do it all. On this podcast, I talk with people about how they use R in unique and creative ways. I'm delighted to be joined today by Cédric Vidonne. Cédric Vidonne is an information management officer at UNHCR, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. And Cédric specializes in data visualization. With over 15 years of experience in the humanitarian sector, Cédric has developed a wide range of data-driven products from infographics to reports and maps, while also contributing to data visualization guidelines, templates, and standards. Beginning his journey in 2008 with a focus on mapping, he's since expanded his expertise into complex infographics and data visualization. And recently, Cedric embraced R, transitioning from a design-centric approach and has developed a few R packages to support the growing UNHCR R community. Cedric, welcome and thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really happy to be here. Super excited. Kind of stressed at the same time when I see the people you've interviewed in the past, but really happy to be there. Happy to share my experience of
Great.
R.
Well, I am excited for people to learn more about you and the really interesting work that you do. Because I spoke with Amadou Diko on a previous podcast episode, who I know you work with. We were talking some about the kind of design work that you have done and how that's fit in with the work at UNHCR. But before we get to that, I'd love to know, I talked a bit about your background, but if you can kind of give me like the Cliff Notes, short version of your background and how you've ended up, working at UNHCR doing the type of work that you do today.
So as you mentioned, I'm currently information management officer, specializing in data visualization at UNHCR. I'm based here in Geneva, Switzerland, which is the HQ of UNHCR. So that's the main central point. Um, I've been doing the humanitarian work for over than 15 years. I started in 2008 back in New York, actually, with another UN agency. And I started as an intern. It was an internship during my master degree in GIS. So I have a background in geography and GIS, and I started as an intern within the UN system, making maps. I was a cartographer at the time. So I started making maps for the UN, and it went really well. And my actual boss over there, she was really interested in design, infographics, and data visualizations. So that's all I kind of like transitioned to, not only making maps, but making information products that were including maps, charts, some narrative, a real context about the situation and everything. So that's all kind of like slide from only making maps to making more complex and, I would say, design-centered information product. So that's kind of like this slow slide I did to data visualization, and it became my bread and butter. I got really hooked up onto it. So I just started to do everything I was making. Always had some maps component, but had more and more design, charts, plots, and everything. Um, as you mentioned, that was always kind of like a more static approach, meaning, the typical way of going into a GIS software, making a map, exporting it in Illustrator, polishing it, then doing charts there, blah, blah, a lot of manual work. But that has been the way of doing infographic within the UN for quite a long time, and I think it's still the case. So probably it's what we'll discuss a bit later. But that's the actual status in the humanitarian world. And then I started working for another other agency, UNHCR. When I started back in 2012 or 13, I think, no, 2013, it was really there are no people doing visualization at UNHCR, so it was really the beginning. There was no pure real brand at the time neither, so that was really something kind of new. Information product were always there, but more in the format of a PowerPoint or data or information like this. But yes, I started, and we built then more guidelines, templates, and tools, and all the things we're gonna a bit discuss today. And yeah, that's basically how I started,
Yeah.
and I got hooked up into data
So I'm
visualization.
curious, like, can you give me, I don't know, a couple examples of say when you first started working at the UN as an intern, what were the types of maps that you were making? What does the UN want to see mapped?
Basically, it was, I would say, when there was an earthquake happening somewhere, you would just map where the earthquake happened, what was the most affected areas, and these kind of things. Or when you have a first displacement of people, where did they move first? What border crossing points did they take? And this kind of thing. The idea was to be always super I would say quick. And so basically, when it happened, after a day or two afterwards, we had a map and everything that we could show on it and stuff like this. It was not super detailed and everything, but at least information was there and you could see it visually and geographically where it was happening in the world and or how we could react and maybe what was the best way forward after
That
that.
makes a lot of sense. And so at that time, you said you were using you were not working in R at that point.
No,
So I'm
not at all.
curious, kind of
Yeah.
how R fits into this. How when did you get into R? What led you to do that, and what has that changed in terms of the work that you do?
I think I got into R fairly recently. I think my first interaction with R was probably in
Oh wow,
2020, not before that. So yeah, it's kind of new for me, and it's actually colleagues. So within UNHCR, you mentioned Amadou, that has been part of this podcast before, that I'm working constantly with. And there was other people like Edouard Le Goupil that was also kind of a pioneer in the UNHCR community. And I think we started like a super small team that were actually doing art, not actually even team. It was more like people scattered around the globe starting to do, trying to find ways to be a bit more efficient, a bit less manual, try to do, more work that can be a bit automatized and not just only copying, pasting, and I think that's basically why I started. They kind of like dragged me into that, and maybe the other component that kind of like sold me the our thing was all the incredible V's like you could find in Tidy Tuesday or these kind of challenges where you see people making incredible visuals straight out of R, and also people that you had in that podcast before. So it's like, wow, you can actually make that just with code. And for me, it was kind of like a game changer. I think I started fairly slowly by just using it for ggplot. I was not
hmm,
even cleaning and wrangling my data. I was
yeah,
in R. I was still doing it in Excel and just plugging my data, doing my plot, and oh, okay, I can make that. That's fine, and now I can replicate it easily and stuff like this. And strangely enough, I think I started maybe after 2 months. I was actually playing with R. I started building a package
wow,
as a
wow,
request of my colleague. They were like, because it was the package itself was not really about R. It was more about CSS,
uh
HTML,
huh,
and this kind of thing. So it was for a report
okay,
template. So it was more this kind of things. So it was in page
yeah,
down. So basically, most of it is CSS. So it's not really R. So that's a bit how I got dragged into that, and I think yeah, it took me quite some time to start doing data wrangling and everything in R, but yeah, I think now I'm definitely using it daily. Probably not to make all only these and stuff like this, but just to wrangle my data instead of opening it in Excel. I will start doing it here, analyzing it quickly, making quickly a plot if I need, or this kind of things. And it changes a lot of things. And from what we probably see in the future in this discussion, I think it's also the repetition of the task. I mean, often we have to do the same product over and
sure,
over, or we have to update it, the data changes, and we are in a really, I would say, fluid world where emergencies happen every
yeah,
day, and you get data in the morning and the data in the afternoon will be different. So if you do everything manually, basically you start over the process again and again. So that's for me probably the game changer. And I mean, I don't think we are there yet, but I think it's what we
yeah,
are trying to build now. And also, it's fairly new for our community, even in of data people that have been working in Excel or in databases for years. They're not all familiar with R, but it's growing. It's growing. I think when I first started to build this package, we were, I don't know, maybe a couple of dozens of playing with R in UNHCR. And now we have kind of a community where we have a chat, we are sharing experience, tips, and tricks. and it's more than 150 people now.
Wow.
So it's growing, and it's I think people are getting interested, and yeah, there are definitely ways of doing our job, I think, more efficiently and in a more in a reproducible way, and also I would say we are more accountable. We can show how we did
Uh-huh.
it. We can, people can replicate it and can access the data, can do their own analysis, and just, see that with open eyes, and not something that is hidden
Yeah.
somewhere in an Excel of a person and in an Illustrator file. So I think that's where we are
Yeah.
heading. Not sure we're there yet, but I think
Yeah.
that's what we are trying to
I,
do.
I'm amazed. I didn't realize there were 150 people using R at UNHCR. That's a quite a sizable number. I'm curious. Can you give me some examples of what are the kind of jobs that those folks have, and what are they typically doing with R?
I think this is also due to the fact that we have more and more statisticians within the organization. Amadou is one of them, and we kind of went through a process of regionalization a few years back. So people that were based at HQ are now sitting with the different region around the world. So it kind of increase the number of
Hmm.
people that have this kind of statistic background. I think we also now starting to do more and more data science work with modeling and all of these things that before we were not really
Yeah.
doing. Data became really central to UNHCR a few years back. UNHCR trying to be the reference when we, in terms of data, when we talk about displacements and forced displacement and people moving around countries and crossing borders. And so I think the importance of data in senior management and even really high in the organization really changed a few years back. And the importance, all the data that we actually collect and have every day, it's a lot. And now we are doing something with it, and I think this created definitely profiles that we didn't really have
Yeah.
before that are now part of the organization, and also why they increase the interest for R really increased, and people are using it more and more. Or people like me that were doing visualization work and dealing with Excel to make my viz and stuff, and now I'm just doing it all in R, and I don't have to switch back and forth. And if the data changes tonight, I can just
Yeah.
rerun the thing and I have it.
I
So
wonder if you could give
that's
me an example just to make it really concrete, like an example of a project that you have worked on or seen someone work on recently using R at UNHCR.
uh, well, using R, I think I I don't have project, or at least that I know of, that I'm using R from the beginning to
Hmm.
the end, because I think we also have this variety of profiles. Some people that are doing also data related job that have no experience in
Mm.
R, and we are still in this world where
Hmm.
Excel is definitely the king. We have Excel, we have GIS software that have been
Sure.
around for years, and we also have now Power BI. People are really fan of Power BI and the dashboard and everything. So and it's also the tools that the organization provides. R, it's something a bit different. You have to be interested, you have to download it and use it. But I think if I would be dreaming, I think if we could make what we do a lot in the humanitarian sector for emergencies, we are making a lot of one pager
Mm.
PDF that is basically kind of like a summary of the situation. So basically, you have a couple of key figures that, let's say, oh, you have 2.1 million people displaced and blah blah blah, and this kind of thing. And then you have a couple of graphs that will show probably the evolution of displacement, or the type of people, or the type of needs that they might have. And then you have a map with something, or where are those people, what do they need, where do we need shelter for them, and all of these things, they are kind of like summarized in a nice and beautiful way on a piece of
Uh-huh.
paper. And I would love to be able to just do all of it in
Yeah.
R, basically from the collection of the data, from cleaning it, from making my visuals and stuff. That would be the case. But in a day-to-day, I would say we're doing a lot of data
Okay.
stories with my team. So we are a very small team that basically we are more a support team. So we offer support to other within UNHCR, either for just making simple chart, or making reports, or making more important stories. And we do more advanced data stories that are maybe have time to show afterwards. But that are a lot of it's an actual story, like you can see in the pudding, or
Yeah,
all
yeah.
this kind of media where you have a narrative, you have pictures, you have visuals and stuff, and basically make all the visuals and the data wrangling that is tied to those visuals in R. And then even on the main UNHCR.org website, we have a few visuals that have been, or maps that have been actually created from zero to from A to Z in
Wow.
R, all of it from the as a production visual. And other things I've seen, if you could have seen it maybe with Amadou, it's all those presentation of statistics. So they call the data directly from API in R and make this presentation, and then they can then present to senior management or to donors the statistics that are up to date, branded straight out
Right.
of R, because we have made some packages like this. And we also have like a lot of reporting templates. And so this, I'm not really in the report business in terms of day-to-day job, but I think that's why I built those packages,
Yeah.
because people could just, without thinking, with just adding a template to their project, having a beautiful UNHCR branded product that they don't have to think about, just to think about the content and don't care about the look and
Yeah,
feel.
that makes sense. And yeah, I'm looking
So
forward to chatting in a few minutes with you about both a package you have made for that has a ggplot theme for UNHCR, and then also a Quarto
yeah.
template that you've made to kind of help people who want to, take those plots that they make as well as text and whatever else maps maybe, and add them to a nice template. So before we dive into that, I guess I'm just curious, why is UNHCR invest so much in data visualization and kind of making things look good. It seems, I mean, tell me if you think this is wrong, but it seems unique in that there are a lot of organizations that don't invest quite as much effort and capital into this. So do you think it's accurate that UNHCR really cares about that type of thing, and if so, why?
Uh, I'm not sure it's unique in the humanitarian
Okay.
sector. I think another agency, UN OCHA, like an Office for Coordination for Humanitarian Affairs, was probably the kind of like a
Mm,
pioneer in this approach of having really polished visual products that are easily understandable and that you can share with a wide variety of stakeholders, being donors, being non-data
yeah.
people, but that I can senior management, but they can still get a sense of the situation. And I think that's something where the they saw the importance of their brand early on in the process. UNHCR has built a really strong brand. I think we started in 2015, like building a really strong and bold brand that is recognizable and that people can identify to. And I think that brand, followed by the data and the importance of the data for UNHCR, made it that we needed nice, beautiful, polished, and with a really strong standard data visualization. So I think that's where a bit how it's
Yeah.
built out, and why we're here now. And I yeah, probably UNHCR is good, well placed in this. In this organizing all of this standards and everything. But I think we are not the only one.
Okay.
Yeah, there at least in the humanitarian
Yeah.
sector. And I think it's also due to the business itself, or not the business, but I would say the composition of the organization. So I think we are 18,000 people
Oh
working
wow,
for
that's quite large.
UNHCR,
Yeah.
scattered all across the globe in some really remote
Right.
areas, difficult, where you have barely internet. So basically, we need really strong, if you want to feel as
Yeah. Yeah.
one, you definitely need strong standard and brand and guidelines that you can
Yeah.
follow, and that are easy to use also, because being that big and that scattered around the world, you definitely have a wide variety of profile
Yeah.
and technical skills and everything. So it has to be, the user centered more
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
anything else.
So one way that you've kind of implemented, enabling people to use the UNHCR branding is through making a package called UNHCR Themes. We'll post a link in the show notes so people can check it out. Um, Before we have you actually show the code and show how the package works, I'm curious what led you to develop it in the first place.
Well, I think the first, well, the first was the ask from Amadou and others. So basically, if I could, I could
Okay.
make it. I think at the time we developed the first iteration, the R user within the organization were not that high, but yeah, I think in 2018, it's or no 20 or anyway, a few years back, we developed a database guideline that
Mm,
was the first of its kind for UNHCR. That was kind of like following the brand, and this database guideline was the idea of this database guideline was to be technologically agnostic, meaning that you could apply those recommendations through different system, being Excel, being Illustrator, being whatever you were
right.
using, you could just apply overall recommendation. So based on that, it was super easy to just say,
Mm,
let's make a ggplot theme that just embrace those recommendations, so people can simply by adding a couple of lines in their code, starting from a default ggplot chart to something that is UNHCR branded, that people can
hmm.
recognize with the colors, with the fonts, to the organization of the headers, or of the title, subtitle, and everything. So I think that was basically the idea. Just again, try to cover as much possible ground we could with those standards, so it makes any user able to make UNHCR branded charts. Again, with this database guideline, we created tons of templates and tools, even in
Hmm.
PowerPoint, even in Excel. I mean, everything we
Yeah.
could. I have a colleague that is really strong in D3 and Python, so we also have Python templates
Yeah.
and D3 templates to make visualization that are UNHCR. So it's basically it kind of a bit of luck, meaning like I had the R willing, I mean, I had the willingness to learn R, and I had the design
Yeah.
background, so we're like, oh, let's try this, and it was a good introduction to R for me, and I really like it, and yeah, I'm a bit of a kind of a, I don't know if I can say that, but I'm a bit of a freak of like
Yeah. Yeah.
consistency
Totally.
and stand and stuff, and so it was just expanding that a bit. So yeah, that's how it started, and just again, I think everything we do in terms of guideline and templates and tools is just trying to support colleagues out there, and so it makes make their life easier. So basically, if it's just adding a line to their R code to get a nicely polished UNHCR plot, I think we can just spend a couple of days or weeks trying to build a package
Yeah.
that will fit their needs. This package with the community really matured, and it's now on CRAN and everything. So it became something really, it became something that is now really within the organization. People know that
Yeah.
package and are using it and making plots with it.
Cool.
So yeah, I think it really
Well,
supporting the
maybe
team.
what would
So I'm
be
happy with
interesting
that.
at this point is to have you put your screen up and show. And
Yeah,
maybe I was even thinking actually, if you want to first start by showing the DataViz guidelines website, because I didn't realize how much
yeah,
that spurred the creation of the theme. So maybe show that first. So you have up now
yeah.
the website, the data visualization platform. I wonder if you could just like kind of briefly walk us through this.
Okay, so yeah, so the website was not the first thing we did. Was we started with the guideline that is kind of like more traditional PDF that was just about charts and layout and stuff like this. But based on the success of the guideline, we're like, why not expand a little bit more and kind of like have a platform here where people can come and get everything they need about data visualization for UNHCR. So basically, we have a little part about that what we call chart gallery. It's where you can find all the information about chart types, what chart types to use in what context, what is the best to use, what are the bad practices, what are the things to avoid. A bit in the vein of like the what it was like the
Our graph
what's the
gallery.
name of this?
The
Yeah,
Jan
the R
Holtz.
graph
Yeah,
gallery,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So actually, we kind of like kind of use a bit of his
Okay.
idea of having pie chart type and stuff. So that's what we did. We definitely have the guideline itself where you can see at a glance just what are the guidelines, and then all the tools. Being in Office, being in Illustrator, being in R, D3, Power BI, even GIS, and everything is there. And then we have a little showcase place where we show our biggest products, the more like data story like
Yeah.
products. So that's a bit how we organize the website. And so basically, as I said, if you go to the chart gallery, you see a different type of chart where you can go and you click on one and it will tell you what is the best use for this chart, the do's and don'ts, and these kind of things. And then it will link to the different tool that we have available for every single type of those charts. So that was a bit the idea. Something I haven't mentioned yet is that part of our job is also some trainings.
Mm.
So we do a lot of trainings of
Hmm.
colleagues. We do data visualization training when we teach them what are the best practices, when to use this type of chart. A bit what you can see on this platform, but as a face-to-face, and try also to train them in the different
Yeah.
software. Simple ones like Microsoft Office, but also more advanced Illustrator or this kind of thing. And more, like now we are doing some scripting and coding with R and different
Cool.
tools. Again, here just the guidance. So basically, you can download the guideline. But what you asked before about the ggplot theme, the idea was basically to replicate that.
Right.
So how can I apply those style that my title is black and bold, that my subtitle is this side, that my legend should be placed here, etc., etc. All of this little detail that you can just set into a ggplot theme. So that was the idea of the package. And the second aspect of the package was the color
Mm.
palette.
Hmm.
So I just have all the ggplot scale available directly in the package, not having to think, what is the color code
Right.
for the blue number one of the palette and this kind of thing. So the colors are a bit strong. That's our
Yeah.
brand. So there was nothing we could really do about it. But yeah, that's a bit the idea. And then we have all the different tools. And being, as I mentioned, MS Office, Power BI, that are really popular within the organization because there are tools that are provided. Illustrator, I think it's more our team, but it's also a lot of people are familiar with Illustrator, something that has been used in the humanitarian sector for quite some times. And GIS, because yeah, we all love
Yeah.
math, so that's something we had. And as I mentioned, we have now coding tools like R, Python, and
Cool.
D3. And we make this one a different approach. It's a bit more like tutorial type of things, where basically you have the code on one side, and then what the result that will give you. So that was the idea of this platform. So it was difficult to make kind of like templates for
Yeah.
charts. I think we might get into that, making functions
Yeah.
like of usual type of charts, maybe bar charts, column charts that could be easily as a function, not even have to create those
Right.
own code for ggplot. But that was a bit the idea of those thing. And yeah, the latest
Yeah.
is our own, like trying to showcase ourselves. And this kind of like, this is ggplot, this is ggplot. Some of those charts are definitely ggplot that has been used, but not
Sure.
all of it. This is also a ggplot. So that, yeah.
Cool. So I can totally see, I mean, especially when you were showing the one chart with that was annotated with, the title should be this and that, like I can absolutely see how that directly then applies to making a theme. So I wonder if you could now kind of show us the UNHCR theme and talk about the process of going from this guidance on the screen to implementation of it as a ggplot theme.
Yeah, sure. As you mentioned, the idea was to basically replicate this approach as a team. We just use a normal package for that. I think I just quickly prepared something here. I just have a simple plot so we can see. So basically, that's what you will get if you make just a simple plot with ggplot. The idea of the UNHCR theme package was to try to keep it as simple as possible. So basically, we created a theme function, a bit like you have for Team Grid or Team Minimal and all of this. We just created a theme UNHCR function that will basically apply all the layout that was presented
Hmm.
here to your chart. So if I just apply this one, it will basically change all my style that it was there and basically replicate what we had on the other chart here, with moving my legend here to the top, having my title now in bold and black, and all of the things that have been just moving around, and the source is now on the left side, and all of this that is basically part of our team. Uh, as I mentioned, the second thing that was important for us was to be able to manage the color
Mm.
directly here, because here you can see I just stick with standard ggplot colors. So we created some scale for the team, so it would make it easier for a colleague to
Right.
just apply them. We basically created a bit like the approach of different color packages for discrete color, for continuous color, and also for
Uh-huh.
bins. But that's basically a bit the approach we take. So if I just with those two lines of code added to my ggplot from the beginning, I will then now get a UNHCR branded chart just out of the box. And I mean, if you just do this, at least you are
Yeah,
90% close to a nice looking chart, at least branded with UNHCR. There are definitely some work, maybe in terms of spacing or arranging a bit your
sure.
plot, but I mean, you get really close to final
Yeah,
and plots that you could easily put in a presentation to senior management just to show an evolution
right.
or something. Or
Yeah, and I
yeah,
know, I mean, from having looked through the code before we chatted, I know that you put a bunch of kind of defaults that work when you just apply theme UNHCR. I know one of the challenges when
yeah.
making a ggplot theme is thinking kind of like, how much do you set the defaults for people and how much do you leave it up to people to, customize further using just the regular theme function from ggplot. So
Yeah.
can you talk about how you have arguments within theme UNHCR, how that works, and what you decided to include there versus leaving up to individuals to customize themselves?
So I think we actually went kind of all in
Okay.
on this one, I would say, where we added a lot of default directly within the team UNHCR. The idea behind was just to make it as simple as possible to the user. The good thing with any ggplot theme is that if you want to override it, you can always call a theme afterwards and overwrite in the way you want it and make it yours. But we really included a lot of default within
Mm,
the theme, but we kept them kind of like open. So basically, you see that the team UNHCR has a lot of
uh-huh.
arguments. It's a function with a lot of arguments, but even if it's not recommended because Lato is the font of choice for UNHCR, you could still go here and say, I don't want Lato anymore, but I want to use
Right.
another font. You can still go, especially if you work for web uh, plots, you probably want to change your font size to something bigger. You can actually impact a lot of elements of the team directly within the team function
Mm,
itself. So that's a flexibility that we wanted the user to have. I think in 90% of the cases, people won't have to change, I would say, up to this.
mm-hmm.
Nothing should happen. But after that, it's where it becomes interesting and where you can start adding some access text if you just want the y axis or this kind of thing where you can play a bit with I want axis title, I don't want, can I play with the grid, I just want my grid on the x
Right.
axis, not on the y, this kind of thing, appearing the legend and stuff. So all of this could be changed directly in the theme afterwards, but I think it's way simpler to just call legend fold
Yeah.
here and have my legend appear within my theme call instead of having to do another plus theme
Yeah.
blah 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 legend and all of this. So I think that was a kind of like the design
Yeah.
decision, trying to make it as user friendly as
I mean, that
possible.
makes sense because I will say the theme options. I can't tell you how much time I've spent on the ggplot documentation website remembering what are
Hmm.
the all the
Yeah,
options you can
tell me
do in the
about
theme function.
it.
So having, the most common ones and being able to adjust them just by calling arguments within the theme UNHCR function definitely makes a lot of sense to me. So one other thing I saw was that within the package, you actually set it up so that when the package is loaded, it updates various geom defaults. In other words, for example, it sets the default font used within geom text. Can you actually just briefly show that in the code of your package and then talk about why you designed it in that way?
Yeah, sure. So basically, when we do the onload of the package, we call the function that we call update geom
And
font
just to
default. We
clarify,
did that.
on load, I've never actually used it myself, but I guess what it does is it whenever you run library UNHCR themes,
Yes,
that function also runs,
exactly.
correct?
Exactly. So the idea was to If you scroll down our really, so that's our
It's quite
theme,
long.
but at the bottom we have this, yeah, yeah, it's a really long one. We have the update geom default function, which basically will update everything about geom text, geom label, and gg repel. So basically you have text repel and label repel, where it will actually call the Lato font. This is made because usually if you do a normal ggplot call and then you call here a geom text and you add some label to this call, it will actually go back to the
Right.
default font of your computer, being the sans serif font or whatever, it's the default font of your computer. So that was to avoid the fact that if somebody make a plot and add labels to the plot, that the labels are actually not
Yeah.
using the UNHCR default font, but another font. So instead of having people calling that font at the beginning here, basically what you should do is you should call that font update the geom default here at the beginning manually, instead of having asked people to do that or have to enter that the font family is blah 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 directly here. It's call on load, so they don't have to think about it.
Yeah. I mean, that's super smart. I know. I was looking at the Urban.
That's an Amadou trick.
Yeah, the
It's not
Urban
mine.
Institute has a ggplot theme where they do that. I think they do that as well. It makes a ton of sense because I know it's really confusing for people, especially when they're starting out. They're like, "Wait, I have to set the font family in the theme, but then that's separate from every time I use geom text." So that makes a ton of sense to implement it that way.
Yeah. And talking about text, another thing that we did, and I think that was a really nice one, is we included GG text as the default for title and
Mm,
subtitle. So basically, if I have a really long subtitle or
hmm.
title, I can just run with the team UNHCR. We implemented GG text as the main thing. So first of all, now you can stylize some of the text directly with the
Right.
HTML code. And the best of it is it's
Oh,
graph.
that's
So
nice.
you don't have to think about cutting, where does my line cut, blah blah
Yeah,
blah, and I have to insert the code. And because I think this is a really tricky one always when
definitely.
you are like, oh, where, and especially when you're playing in the plot panel here and then you save and it changes completely. So with GG checks it's just automatic and people don't have to think about it. So yeah, as anything we've made, I think everything was always made to make it people's life
Yeah,
as easy
yeah.
as
Well,
possible.
speaking of making people's lives easier, in addition to making this theme, you also have made several Quarto extensions. The
Yeah,
one that I thought might be interesting to talk about was the reveal.js template. So this is a template for people who want to make slides using Quarto, and it applies UNHCR branding. And I know in our email correspondence
yeah,
before we were talking today, you said, well, this isn't actually R. This is like a lot of HTML and CSS. But I think it's actually useful to
yeah.
show because I think obviously the content that you would put in a template like this or in a presentation would be made in R, um, but the process of customizing it and making it on brand is going to be done with other things. So can you talk to me just before we even actually show it, if you can actually just
Yeah.
talk about the process at a very high level of making a Quarto extension and what that involves?
To be honest, for me, it's been a game changer, especially for SAS and CSS, Quarto versus R
Hmm.
Markdown in the development process, because basically the structure of your extension follows the same structure as your final extension, or when the people will use it. Basically, it will create an underscore extension UNHCR folder on their
Mm.
project. And so basically, the good thing is that you can work on the visual aspects straight with the same structure of your extension. You don't have to go, because I remember, for example, doing a lot of
Yeah.
page down report extension. You have to do all the SAS and CSS before with calling directly in your extension to see the
Yep.
result, and then you
Yep.
package
Yep.
that into a package. So it's an extra step, and I think this is really been a game changer, at least for me, in terms of creating those extension. And basically, the creation of extension, I think Posit made it really easy. You just have one line of code in the terminal, and it creates the whole structure for you. And then basically, it's just a YAML file, and then all the different resources that you might need. And your YAML file is really, really easy, where you can set the different default form, what format you're using as a base, here being just reveal.js, and then some themes that are recalled. So we have our specific SCSS, that it's the UNHCR one, and some logo that you can add, and some basic default information that you can put, and that's basically it. You have a new extension, and then, as you mentioned, it's a lot of basically CSS. So you just call your brand color, you just change that, and then just make it so it's a look and feel of your brand, and that's basically it. I think there is Emil that is doing a lot of those kind of like
Yeah.
extension for Reveal, yes, and a lot of CSS, and yeah, that's why I felt a bit like an imposter being here talking about R, because I think it's a lot of it's a lot
I
of SAS.
mean,
I'm not doing
that's
a
what
lot
we
of
do a lot of as well, is combining R with
yeah.
other tools. Can you also show, because I know there's the template.qmd file, because that's where you actually kind of lay out the like default content that shows up when someone makes this. So if you could show
Yeah.
that file, that would be helpful.
So we decided to go for being the template being kind of like guidance at the same time. So it's a reveal presentation. So we just use this, and I have the result
Mhm.
here. We use this as this is the template QMD you get, and it's actually explaining you what the Quarto reveal is, how to use the extension, and how do you create basic slide. Just the simple explanation on how to make a Quarto reveal presentation with this extension. So that's basically what we decided to do for this one. And in the past, we were just putting like random content in it,
Yeah.
just as
Yeah.
example. And people were like, yeah, but how do I do this? How do I do that? And we thought that, providing a minimal set of the basic thing that you can do with the extension makes it a way easier for people to then use it, and not having to, go back, especially, really specific things that when you have to call a class that is specific to UNHCR
Right.
that is not present somewhere else. So that we thought that was a
Yeah.
good way of presenting the how to do it to the user straight in the template, meaning that we would probably have to delete everything that's in
Sure.
the template to work on their thing. But yeah, I guess 90% of the time anyway, it's the case. People will remove everything that's in the template to do their own.
And can you
So
just show me
doesn't
briefly, like
really
flip over, say, to RStudio and show me, if someone's working in a project, what it looks like to be able to use your template that you've created?
Yeah, sure. There are two ways of kind of like starting to use those extension. If you go back to the extension itself, either install it and get the
Hmm.
template, or you can also install it on your
Right.
already existing project. So if you use this call from Quarto in the terminal, it will actually create a new template for you. It will call the old extension. So use template will actually ask me to create a
Hmm.
subfolder. Uh, if my internet is working, yes, I trust myself. I will create a subdirectory, and I will put demo. And here it will unzip the old extension, and it will actually create a new demo folder in my thing, where basically I have the demo QMD. And if I run this demo QMD, it will create exactly the same result as what we've seen here. So all the different thing. And as you can see in the YAML, I have now the format UNHCR reveal GS that is going to go for all the resources that are under this
So at
extension
this point, a
folder.
user could just, render this. I mean, obviously they'd want to change the content, but they could render this, see that sample presentation, and then delete the default content and add their own content, and it would all be on brand. Is that right?
Yes. Yes, exactly. So if I run this one, or I can even, I just ran it, but yeah, I could delete some of the content. Basically, it will render my QMD file and it will create this branded presentation using the blue from UNHCR, the color, the font, the styles that we've implemented in the SaaS. Oh, I know what I know I have an error here. I know why. Let me remove a bit of the content, but plot is he's not happy with the plot
Hmm.
for some reason. So if I run this, it will be faster anyway.
Does it have Python in it?
What? No. What's going on? It's always like this. I run this morning. It was working perfectly, and it's not.
I don't think
Well,
it's that big a deal, to be honest. Like, because you already showed
anyway,
it before.
I had it prepared, but what I actually wanted to say it's that basically you can also run instead of using the template, you can actually install the
Hmm.
extension directly in your folder, and basically you can start with this default simply that is a default reveal.js presentation, and then by just installing the extension locally on your machine and calling it in the
Yeah.
terminal, you can basically in one line of code, it will install this
Hmm.
extension in your folder, and then instead of getting the default extension, you will get the it's working. I don't know what the Python thing created that. So that's what you get with the
Uh-huh.
default QMD if you do a reveal.js. If I just install my extension and I apply this here, and instead of
Oh,
calling
I see
the
on line 3.
reveal.js that I had
Uh-huh.
here, I call the UNHCR reveal, and I run this one. It's exactly the same file. I haven't changed
Right.
anything. It will basically re-render the same presentation, but with the
Yeah.
UNHCR look and feel.
That's great. I mean, it just shows kind of like
Uh,
how easy it is for a user. I mean, obviously you put in the work up front, but then for a user, they change one
yeah,
line and it's all on brand.
yeah, yeah. And I think
Hmm.
now it is. So you see, it's exactly the same presentation, and then now in conjunction with the UNHCR team, I had actually a third example where basically then you apply the theme to this
Uh-huh.
ggplot, and you have a default UNHCR branded presentation of statistic that you can go and just show to senior management. And if the data changes 20 times, it doesn't
Right.
matter. You just re-render it, and you have your newly updated presentation
Yeah.
out of the box. So that's the idea of those
Yeah, well,
two.
that's great. I mean, that's such a good
But
example
yeah,
then of how they kind of, fit together. You can have individual plots within the presentation and then the template that
yeah,
wraps them together. So, um,
I have it here. But if I open it here, you probably see. So that's exactly the same
mhm.
again. And here
Oh,
I
yeah, you
just
can see.
apply the
Perfect.
style. So
Yeah.
that's you know out of the box. It's
Yeah.
just you don't have to think about the design and
Yeah, yeah,
layout.
that's
It's
great.
done for you. So that's the whole
Great.
idea.
Well, awesome. This has been really interesting to see, the development of both the theme as well as the Quarto extension. Um, I think it's great to see, how you can use various tools within the kind of R sphere to keep everything on brand. If people want
Yeah.
to learn more about this or learn more, about the work you do at UNHCR, we'll obviously post some links. Are there particular places or places you would point people to?
Well, I think for everything related to what we did today, it's definitely the database platform is the go-to place where you can also find all the different links to our different R tool that we've made, the templates, the packages, and everything like this. And we also showcase other type of packages, like the more data-centered packages that Amadou talked about the previous time. All the statistic data that we have that is packaged into some R package. So that's a good thing.
Cool.
And yeah, and I wish that in the future we can go even further and really work on more I would definitely would like to pick up your brain maybe another time to see how you work on parameterized
Sure.
reporting and stuff like this and layout. Unfortunately, I haven't had time to play a bit with tips, but I think it's something I created a Quarto extension for Page.js
Yeah.
also, but because at the beginning I thought it was the direction that POSIT was taking, but it seems that it's not going to be the
Yeah.
case. So probably tips will be the way to go, but I haven't had time to really play with this. But I think we could create really nice, simple
Yeah. Yeah.
layouts that
Definitely.
people can use. And because yeah, people love PDF in our org type
Yes.
organization. PDF is still what people want. They want to be able to print it, go to a meeting with it, show
Right.
it, and so that's
Yep, definitely.
yeah,
Well, I'll post a link to that as well if people want to see kind of how you've been playing around with making PDFs using the Page.js JavaScript library. So
yeah.
great. Well, Cedric, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, and it was a pleasure to be here.
That's it for today's episode. I hope you learned something new about how you can use R. Do you know anyone else who might be interested in this episode? Please share it with them. If you're interested in learning R, check out R for the Rest of Us. We've got courses to help you no matter whether you're just starting out with R or you've got years of experience. Do you work for an organization that needs help communicating effectively with data? Check out our consulting services at rfortherestofus.com/consulting. We work with clients to make high-quality data visualization, beautiful reports made entirely with R, interactive maps, and much, much more. And before we go, one last request. Do you know anyone who's using R in a unique and creative way? We're always looking for new guests for the R for the Rest of Us podcast. If you know someone who would be a good guest, please email me at david@rfortherestofus.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.